Hello, my name is Anna, and I'd like to welcome you to the Well-Appointed Mystic. Today, I'd like to talk about customizing your tarot and oracle decks. And I know a lot of other creators on YouTube have covered this topic, but I thought I would give you sort of my perspective and how I go about doing customization and various things. And I'm going to have to caveat this with two things. One, my husband is a printer, and so I have the access to big industrial cutters, which means that when I want my deck trimmed, I hand it off to my husband and say, "Can you trim this down for me?" And he puts it on his big industrial cutter and he goes ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. And all the sides are trimmed perfectly. And then he either brings it back to me and I round the corners, or he actually uses an industrial corner rounder. So my decks come back to me absolutely perfect and look like they came from the printers. So I have a bit of a cheat there, which is super amazing. And if you have access to someone who works in a print shop or a place like FedEx Kinko's or anything like that, then I highly recommend reaching out to them and seeing if they can help you out, because it saves a ton of time and will give you absolutely professional looking quality. But also, these can be done at home. And some of the reasons that I do this is that I get a deck and they're too big for my hands, or I don't like the borders. And rather than getting rid of a deck because I don't like it because it has big white borders or some other element, being able to modify a deck to make it something that you want to use, makes it more your deck. So making these changes and making these adjustments, I think, personalizes the decks. So I have a couple different things, and beyond just trimming edges or painting your edges, I have a few other things that I wanted to go over. So we're going to start with deck trims. So I'm going to show the Arcanus Animal Tarot first, which is a deck that is a tarot deck, but sold from Hay House, was oracle sized. So it was enormous size. And I have tiny little hands and could not for the life of me hold on to these cards. And they had enormous amounts of white space. So I had my darling husband trim these down so that they are now just slightly taller and larger than playing card size. But he was able to trim them almost evenly, top to bottom. The only thing that they need now is to paint the edges, and I think what I will do is paint them black, because there's a little bit of, I just think it'll make it look more clean. But they still have lots and lots of white space on these cards, but just not nearly as much. There was just so much white space that I felt like I was looking at the white space and not the artwork on the cards. And I think that it is lovely artwork. So I feel like this saved these decks. So if you look at the guidebook, you can get a sense for just how much he trimmed these down. So they were really quite large. You know, I mean, if you flip these over, that'll give you a sense of scale of how big these cards were. So this is a really good example. So now I just need to sit down and paint these edges. And like I said, I think black will look really good. Although if I had a good metallic gold, that might also look nice. So anyway, this is the Arcanus Animal Tarot, which was from Hay House and was created by David Di Pasquale. Di Pasquale? I'm not sure how you say that. I hope I didn't make a real pig's ear of it. So while we're talking about Hay House, this is the Denise Lynn Oracle, Sacred Destiny Oracle, and most people will talk about this deck as having giant white borders that can be both an advantage and a disadvantage. Because the borders are so big, it can create a lot of white space. So if you're working with a tarot deck as well, it can create some white space and a little breathing room. But it was, again, big Hay House deck. I'll use the guidebook for example. So in this case, these were just trimmed down to lessen the border. And my husband was nervous. This is probably one of the first decks I asked him to trim down, and he was a little nervous about trimming all the way down since there is this little gray border here, because I was ready for him to just trim the whole mess down. And he's like, it's easier for me to trim more than to try to put the paper back. So I said, that's great. I like them this way. The border's just smaller, so it still creates a little breathing room when I use them in a spread, but they're not quite as big and obnoxious. No offense to Hay House. It was just a lot. And like I said, my hands are really small. I still have trouble shuffling these, but this definitely makes them better. So that is just another example of sort of just trimming, but maybe not trimming all of the borders. This is the Intuitive Night Goddess deck. This one got trimmed because it got damaged in shipping. So the edges got a little dinged up for some reason. And they had pretty large borders as well. And I just wanted to play around with it since they were already damaged. So the edges were all painted black. Not well. I should probably go back and redo them. This is one of the first decks that I ever painted myself. But we trimmed off all of the edges, and I think I did these myself. I don't think I had Bob do these, but it's a little tight, but it became a deck then that all of a sudden I can shuffle myself. I can hold in my hand, and it's just really focused on the art. So I thought it was kind of fun. I do have a full-sized version of this deck as well, but since this one was damaged and the corners were all dinged up, it seemed like the right thing to do to just go ahead and play with this, since it was sort of unusable the way that it was. And to note, the publisher did actually send me a new deck because this one had been damaged, so I felt like it was safe territory to play with it. So if you've ever wanted to see what this looks like trimmed down, now you know. So it looks kind of cool. I think it gives it much more of that like a vintage, like some of those like Italian, because it's much taller and thinner, like this without the big borders. So just something to think about. I really like it like this. So I think eventually I will make a bag for it, because now when it sits in the box, it kind of rattles around. So, but anyway, so that's the Intuitive Night Goddess. There's one other deck that I recently trimmed, and that is the Cozy Witch. This is a deck that I think a lot of people have acquired recently. Some people really like it. Some people have had mixed opinions. The artwork is super cute and charming. Amanda Lovelace and Janana Medeiros is the illustrator. But one of the things that people have either loved or were less fond of was the fact that each of the cards had like a key phrase at the bottom. And what I discovered as I had started playing with the deck was that the guidebook included the key phrase. So even if I didn't necessarily agree with the message from the key phrase, I didn't necessarily need it on my card, because it would exist even if it was gone. So I went ahead and trimmed them off so that now my cards, the cards were big, so the borders are gone and the key phrases are gone. So now they are just rounded corners and the title. So if I would like to see what the key phrase was that Amanda Lovelace used for the Five of Cups, I can look it up. Spilled tea isn't the end of the world. So I can refer to it if I want, but it's not necessary. Like, I have my own interpretation of the Five of Cups as well, which is sort of, you know, the glass half empty, glass half full kind of thing. Like, don't forget, it's not always half empty, which is similar to her message, but sometimes you get caught up in someone else's interpretation and you sort of get stuck. So this definitely helps to take that away a little bit and sort of look more at the imagery before you're sort of seeing that key phrase message. So I think that this was a great solution for me. I don't know if this is helpful to anybody else, but I thought it would be really nice to show specifically what changes I made to the Cozy Witch. And the funny thing was that when I started doing this video, I specifically wanted to talk about picking out a color to do the edging for this deck, because that's the next thing I want to do to sort of finish it off in terms of customizing it. And I realized that in trimming this off, there's definitely a top and a bottom now, because the pentacles at the bottom sort of got chopped off because the trim is not quite even. But I think it looks so much better on the front. So I think because the backs are definitely this sort of warm brown color, I do think that in the end, I'm going to need to pick sort of like a warm color, but I don't think that this is going to quite do what I want it to do. I have a lot of green pens, but I think I might have to actually purchase a pen to do it. I think that's too yellowy. So anyway, if you guys have any suggestions of a color, if you've edged your Cozy Witch with a specific color, I would love a recommendation. I do have a couple others. I have one other that I trimmed specifically, but I also want to talk about bags. So that's the other customization. But this was the Sugar Skull Tarot. This is one of the decks that I absolutely fell in love with, but it also was super oversized, and even trimmed, it's still, even trimmed down, it's still almost as big as like an oracle. It's as tall and still pretty wide. It was bigger. It had big black borders, and the corners were square. They had not been rounded. So the first thing that needed to happen was that the corners desperately needed to be rounded because they were pokey. So it was definitely a deck that as soon as I got it, I knew it needed love and care. Because it's the Sugar Skull deck, it definitely needed black edging. And so it was trimmed all the way down. The corners were rounded. I mean, except that I would hate to lose, because it's fairly RWS related, I could probably trim it all the way down if I wanted and still be able to identify it. But I think this took care of most of the issues that I had with it. They're still big cards. I would love for them to do a mini version of this deck because the artwork is pretty graphic and simple, so I think it would scale really nicely. It's just like, I love the art on this deck. I lived in New Mexico for several years, so this artwork really speaks to me. Just sort of, I guess there's a little part of me now that is a little New Mexican. I never thought I would say that, but it's true. The only other thing is that this guidebook completely fell apart. Like, literally the pages fell out. And I sent an email to the publisher asking if they might send me a new guidebook or something. Like, this is terrible. It's Simon & Schuster, for Christ's sake. And it is just, like, all the pages fell out of the book. So, not happy about that. I keep trying to decide, I don't even think that I could paste this in. Like, I guess I could, because there's pictures on the back of each one of these. So this could get pasted into a book of some sort. I'd just lose all the artwork. So I don't know. I don't know what to do with it. If anybody has any suggestions of what to do with the absolutely, it's just terrible, terrible, terrible. But on to bags. So I'm a knitter and a bit of a sewer. And so one of the things I think is awesome in the tarot community is a lot of people are super crafty. And so making your own bags that feel thematic is a great way. Bags, pouches, whatever. It was a great way to sort of put intention into your deck. So when I was making the bag for the sugar skull, I specifically made the cording that goes around the top to match the sort of like hot pink color. And I wanted it to be this sort of, it's sort of a fuzzy gray black with sparkle. So it has a little of that sugary feel to it. This was a pattern that was on Ravelry. It is essentially like just sort of your standard, like, I think it's just listed as like tarot bag on Ravelry. It was like not a big deal. And then I just did like a knit two together, yarn over, knit a few stitches, knit two together, yarn over to create like a little eyelet hole, and then made I-cord for this. So super, super easy. I think I did the sort of Judy's Magic cast on toe thing for the bottom, so there was no seaming, and just knit until it was tall enough. Like I literally just kept knitting it and then sticking the deck in to see if it was tall enough. So it was just very like kind of made without much of a plan, and then able to fit the whole deck and the book in here, which is great since the book is falling apart, and at least this keeps all the pages together. So yeah, I don't think I had intended to keep the book in here, but under the circumstances, it seems like the best plan. And then I made 2 or 3 bags like this. And then after that, I started to customize my own bags, and I much prefer this design, which I sort of made up. And basically I just used the same gauge swatch that I used for socks, because this is like like leftover sock yarn, gauge swatch, and then measure around my deck, calculate the number of stitches, and then do, again, Judy's Magic cast on for the bottom. And I think it ends up being about 120 stitches. And then I just knit until I can fit a deck of cards in, and then add a little bit of ribbing and cast off half of the stitches, and then keep knitting the other half, and then start doing it like an I-cord edge and do some decreases. I really should write this pattern down, but it was very much I winged it as I was making it, until I got to a point where I had like 3 or 4 stitches, and then I just made an I-cord to close it. And I had COVID this past Christmas holiday season, and probably made about 4 or 5 of these, and just kept making them to match various bags. So this one is for the Secret of the Witch's Garden of the Secret Witches, this deck. And I felt like it was a really good match. I painted the edges of this one gold, but I just think it's a beautiful combo. So again, like I said, I think that making your own bags or finding just the right bag kind of sets an intention. You know, you have that thing that's like, oh, this is the perfect match. I will always remember that the Witch's Garden deck is in this bag, kind of a thing. This was one I did some sewing. I found a pattern online for making different kinds of bags like this. So it just has a little gusset, like a channel for your cording, and then just you sort of measure how tall you want it. You make a little gusset bottom. My problem with cotton fabric bags is that they show so much cat hair, and my house is so full of it that all of my bags are just covered in cat hair. But this particular one has, of course, my Everyday Witch deck. It's not a perfect match, but the little black cats remind me of the backs of these. So, and again, these I put blue edging to match the backs. So I'm sure that there would be a better deck match or bag match, but for now, this is my pairing. And I feel like, again, I made the bag, I took the time to edge this, creating sort of that, my personal bond with the deck together. So my last how to make a deck work for you is talking about the Moonflower and Wildflower decks. So these they're not really oracle decks, but can be used that way. But one of them has more of a summery spring vibe, and the other one has more of a nighttime feel. There were cards included. So, there were some. It says, how to use the deck. When I was a child, my summer days seemed endless and full of wonder. Wild daisies lined the fence posts. Red-winged blackbirds sang songs to the meadow, and tiny toads hid in the tall grass. As the sun set, the yard became dappled with fireflies. The sky dazzled with the brightest of constellations, and the distant coyotes' howl became a lullaby to it all. The magic of summers past is woven into my soul. However, now that I'm older, my ability to see beauty in simple things takes more effort. The daily responsibilities of life make it easy to lose touch with the beauty of childhood. I've created a tool to help conjure that lost enchantment of the natural world. You hold in your hands a deck of 78 wild things and special objects. On the back of each card is a sentiment or quotation that will invite you to develop a keener sense of wonder and harmony. There are multiple ways to use this deck. They go on to explain. So what I ended up doing is taking these two decks, because there was some real crossover between what was included in the Wildflower deck and what was included in the Moonflower deck. There were, see the stars sort of listed in both, bumblebee images in both. Some had like more biblical style quotes. Some go to where you feel most alive, walk barefoot in the grass, plant so that your own heart will grow, just different messages like that. But some of the messages felt very similar, and having a deck of 60, 70 cards seemed way too much. So I went through all of the cards and I sort of broke them into piles. So I started with like what the quotes were on the backs, and things that talked about the night, like take a deep breath, that kind of thing, put them in piles. And I was like, there's 4 different ones that have something about the night air or whatever, and sort of just pick the 1 or 2 that spoke most. Maybe I liked the image on the front of this one best and put it in a pile. So in the end, I have 70 maybe cards from a combination of the Moonflower and the Wildflower deck in one slightly easier to use pile. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with these. Like, Get to Know the Galaxies is a beautiful card. Look for Nocturnal Animals is really cute. But there's another card in my deck that says something similar, that maybe just has a picture that I liked better. I long for salt air in my hair. I think there was another one that says, take me to the beach or something, So how I made these work for me is, rather than have 2 decks that sat in my collection that I didn't use or tried to pile them all together and got overwhelmed, I created my own deck, picking the messages that spoke most to me and put them together. And about once a week, I'll pull one of these cards, and I have to shuffle them sideways because they're kind of tall. And actually the cardstock, for being matte cardstock, it's pretty flexible. It's not too bad. I have to like kind of look away because I don't want to pick based on, I like that picture. I just want it to feel random. So I'm sitting here with my eyes closed. So I'm gonna pick a card. The card for this week. Journal by Moonlight. But that's how I solved for the the Wildflower and Moonflower deck. So other people have sort of done the similar things with other larger sets. There's the Crystallary, Herbiary, bestiary sets where the decks have a very similar look and feel, that maybe you pull together animals and flowers and crystals that all speak to you, that you have familiarity with, and make one deck that's specific to your part of the country or your part of the world, and take out the ones that don't resonate as much and have one big deck instead of 3 smaller decks or one ginormous deck. But I just think that there's opportunity to sort of create your own story that way. So those are my 3-4 different techniques for making decks more meaningful to you. There's trimming them, there's edging them, there's making bags or even boxes. There's a really great YouTube video for making your own box. So if you have a deck that maybe came in one of those tuck boxes that's sort of falling apart and you want to make a nice sturdy box with cool, pretty graphics on it, there's a really great tutorial for making those. If you are not a sewist or knitter or crocheter. And then also taking and blending decks together. I mean, isn't that what a lot of people do with those Alleyman tarot decks? So I hope that you find a way to make your favorite decks work better for you. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to see any particular demos. I'd be happy to provide those. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll talk to you again very soon.